we're segueing. I have to use that word. I almost got lost.
Yes, indeed.
It's energy.
Gliding into the next conversation, away from a bit of politics now to deliberations on the African continent to deliver energy to 300 million Africans without electricity. It's called Mission 300, a partnership between the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and other development partners. So joining us on this conversation is Mr. Chibueze AK, who is the CEO, Sizola Energy Limited. He joins us from our Abuja studio. We also have Mr. David Arinze, a renewable energy specialist, who also joins us from our Abuja studio. Good morning and welcome to the program, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. Good morning. Thank you so much. Good morning.
So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Chibueze, Mr. Eke. So it sounds very lofty and ambitious from the surface, but if you look at the funding instruments, that they are drawing from, how should this be executed such that it doesn't end up another talk shop, by African leaders converging and wanting to deliver on good infrastructure to its people?
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I would say it has been a great one having over 24 African presidents represented in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I know typically we would expect it's mostly talk, but I know that this time it was something different. The African presidents have come together in partnership with the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and they have all come together to say, look, if we have over 1 billion people in Africa and about half of them lack access to electricity, let's do something to make sure that at least 300 million people get impacted before the year 2030. So that's a good mission and that's a good vision. Now, what we are going to really be doing now is to, put our mouth, put our money where our mouth is. And as a country, we need to dig into local financing, local currency financing, because it doesn't make sense to go and hope that a lot of money comes, but we don't back it up with local funding. So I see a lot of potential for private sector developers, for the public sector here in Africa. Different African countries and their presidents need to look inwards and ask themselves, what are we really going to do to close this gap? And I think that's where, despite the challenges, there are definitely opportunities. And just coming back from Tanzania, I was happy to see the energy in the room, and I'm confident that our leaders would actually deliver for us.
All right. Let me come to you now, Mr. Arinze. Speak to us about what Nigeria, can get from this, particularly because there are reports that 80% of the people in the world that are without electricity are actually drawn from the African continent. So Nigeria has the biggest chunk of this.
Thank you so much, and good morning again. There are a lot of opportunities here for Nigeria, and of course, when you look at the delegation, our president was on ground with the relevant, with some of the ministers and also different captains of industry from representing the private sector also here in Nigeria. It presents a lot of opportunities for us to rapidly bridge the energy access gap we have. And knowing fully well that SDG 7 has a timeline of 2030, so we have 5 years to get into 2030, and this bold target is to ensure that we bridge the gap, energy access gap, for these millions of the millions of Nigerians and even Africans who do not have access. It presents an opportunity for financing. So finance is on the table. It's one engagement that has also said, hey, we don't just want to drive this as government, but also the private sector has a huge opportunity to play within this. And for me, one of the things that I'm really excited about this initiative is the opportunity where countries have been able to present a blueprint through the compact on how they would tangibly electrify the peoples and the lives of the people and the businesses in those countries. And so for Nigeria, it's access to financing, capital that would unlock more capital. The whole essence of this approach is to see how providing this sort of catalytic capital can unlock more private capital, because why are we where we are? Part of the gaps that we have currently in this sector is the lack of financing that is required to move things, and this sort of initiative puts a lot of action beyond just words. And if I recall the statement, or one of the statements by the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, he said we need to go beyond megawatts of talk and get more megawatts of power to our people, and allow me to say more gigawatts of power to our people.
Very interesting. Let me come back to you, Mr. Rinze, and basically just ask you, in terms of cost now, we understand that Nigeria, for example, needs an investment of $10 billion if we want 24-hour electricity, according to the Minister of Power. But 8 billion naira has been set aside for sensitizing people on power-related issues. And we see the trend for America, for example, saying, well, we're going to drill oil. We're going to ensure that we do whatever works for us. So if it's the so-called fossil fuels that works, we'll go for it. So the environment is not really in the equation for a country like America, because it thinks we have these resources, let's use it. So when you weigh renewable energy against the traditional means of energy generation and all of that, which is really cheaper, and what should work for us as a country, not what is being prescribed for us as a country? I hope you catch my drift.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. When you look at where Nigeria sits in the globe, you see that we have huge potential for solar radiation, for solar development. Now you ask yourself, for you to be able to produce energy for people to consume, you need to look at the different costs and the levelized cost of electricity, depending on the kind of source that you're considering. There's a cost for generating electricity through gas. There's a cost for generating electricity through solar and through other sources. And so for Nigeria, for where we sit, we see that solar has a huge role to play as part of the sources that we have access to. You look at the hydro potential as well. So we have a number of sources that which forms our energy mix that we can explore. So we wouldn't be prioritizing just one source as against the other, but it's a mix, because what is most important is to ensure that we keep the lights on. And in order to ensure that we get that done, we need to also look at what are the sources that ensure that we can generate this same power at the least cost. Now, talking about the bold action by the Minister of Power, I think it's a very timely intervention, because a lot of people need to understand in the country that energy is a commodity that must be paid for, must. And part of the challenges that we see today that is plaguing the sector and impacting finances is because people are not able to clearly see the profitability for them to be able to lock in their investment that enable the sector to scale. And so bold actions like this that the minister has already declared that the country will be taking in order to ensure that a lot more Nigerians understand the role that they play in ensuring that we deliver electricity to them. Also, just that's on one hand, but also keeping the utilities accountable, keeping the generation companies accountable, and other relevant stakeholders within the ecosystem that ensures that we keep the lights on. So this is not just trying to see whether we're trying to adopt the technology, but we have to be able to look at the science, look at the opportunity that is presented to us. Nigeria, if you look at the data, last year was hotter than the year before. And we have clearly seen that part of what is significantly contributing to issues around climate change is the fact that the Earth is getting hotter as a result of the kind of fossil fuel sources that we're using. So these are practical ways to ensure that we do not keep on going, hitting up the earth, like I like to say, but ensuring that we use solutions that is able to get every home and business in Nigeria electrified.
All right, let's look at the data aspect of it all. How much of this is data-driven, particularly because it's not just a project that will be executed in Nigeria alone, but also the entire African continent. Mr. Chibueze, I'm coming to you now. So how much of it is data-driven? And as far as data is concerned, how should this be executed?
Thank you very much. In terms of data, out of the 300 million people that lack this access, a majority is in Nigeria. Now, in Nigeria, it will surprise most Nigerians to know that about half of our population is in darkness. Now, the kind of work we do is that we go into rural communities where people are already living there and they haven't had electric poles or lights before, and we energize these communities. You know, we bring electricity, we bring a source of livelihood for them, improve their income, ensure that children can actually study at night, ensure that women can give birth at night safely, you know, making sure that in terms of public health, there is enough refrigeration, cold refrigeration for vaccines. So when you talk about impact, I mean, the benefits are immense, and the numbers, you can imagine the multiplier effect in terms of sustainable development, in terms of really growing the economy. For Nigeria, this presents a huge opportunity because with the amount of investment we are looking at least $10 billion, it's clear that this cannot come from the government alone. We definitely need private players to come in and think innovatively. How do we unlock some of the pension funds to, you know, come in as
do you see
patient capital, long-term capital?
But do you see a preparedness as far as Nigeria is concerned on that level? Because back home, we just know that there's a significant portion of Nigerians that are without electricity, but we can't actually put a number to it. So are we approaching our participation at this summit with the requisite data, you know, to enable planning and, you know, pitching for the investments that would require, such that there can be accountability in the expenditure of the investment to power those homes?
Very well so. And I would say this because I have already seen how the federal government, through the Rural Electrification Agency, has done a lot around electrifying rural communities. And there are ambition plans for funding to come into the space to, you know, take that to the next level, to scale that up. Now, in terms of scaling that up, what that simply means is, rather than us depend on only the national grid, which we know hasn't really moved the needle much in terms of getting power to Nigerians, we have to think innovatively. We will have to leverage distributed renewable energy resources that are easy to use, easy to build, easy to scale, and that can actually reach the last mile, those who are hard to reach by the grid. So a lot of funding in the world today is going towards climate finance, is going towards innovative approaches to electrifying people, to giving them access to electricity, to better their livelihood. So in terms of the data, I am confident that if we as a country come together, put our acts together and ask ourselves, how do we make sure that we industrialize not just in the urban areas, but most importantly in the rural areas, so that rural farmers can be able to go to farm, process cassava, process palm oil, take these to the urban centers, you know, ideally leveraging renewable energy technologies like solar, like hydro, and also even leveraging electric vehicles to take these products to, you know, where they can actually earn more by selling them. I definitely know that that can catalyze the economy, and Nigeria can become a way better place.
So has the work of the Rural Electrification Agency led us to know that indeed, there are 100 million homes across the northwest and northeast regions that are without electricity, such that we can plan for this endeavor?
Very much so.
So do you have the data? It's the data that I'm after. So do we have the data? Do we have that data?
Yes, you'll be very surprised that we do. We have that data. I mean, in this country, we have data of people with the NINs, with the BVNs. So if you're talking about people who don't have electricity, there's definitely data on them. It will surprise you so.
But we don't have knowledge of it. That's the issue. If we had it, it should be in public domain, shouldn't it?
Should actually. And I think what you can see in the next few days is going to be information about not just the data, right, but the information, the insights you need to make key decisions in terms of investments. And I'm sure that, you know, the relevant agencies very soon will make sure that you have that awareness, and then that way we're all in this together as Nigerians.
Okay, I wonder if Mr. Eke has different opinions on the same subject matter.
Thank you so much. I would say that when you look at where the kind of actions that is taken from the presidency down to the various ministries and agencies, Nigeria today, through a very important initiative by Mr. President, has ensured that the Ministry of Power and all the relevant players are kept on their feet. One, to ensure that energy access is brought to all those who require them. Two, to ensure that we are taking the relevant steps required to mobilize financing. And three, to ensure that we reduce the prevalence of lack of quality and affordable electricity to people. And so this is being done, and just like Engineer Chiboy had said, Nigeria today has that data. There's a lot of mapping that has been done, a lot of government initiatives have gone, a lot of work, down to all the geopolitical zones in the country, identifying down to communities that do not have access to power. Now, you may ask about the availability of this, but I will tell you that with the programs and the initiatives that are planned, all of this would be in the public domain within the near future. And we just need to ensure that everybody understands that they have a role to play in getting Nigeria to the point that we need to get there. And I would just like to also say that when we talk about data, we should also look at the opportunities for us to create jobs as a result of these new initiatives. We have a very youthful workforce, a workforce that can be skilled and reskilled to drive this sector. Nigeria has adopted the SDGs, which is the framework for development across the globe. And we see that if we achieve the SDGs by 2030 globally, we're able to unlock 380 million jobs. That's huge. And now think about it, cascade it down to the largest economy in Africa, the largest country also in Africa, the amount of jobs that would create even within these value chains. And so this is creating a lot of thinking for the government. How can we even begin to ensure that we set up much more industries that are producing these technologies, that are making them homegrown, that are strengthening our education system, that is just doing a lot more work to capture the vibrant workforce that we have and leverage it for not just our country, but also see how we can also be a big brother to other countries around us, thereby bridging this energy access gap that we have to, by all costs, bridge.
Well, you forgive a lot of Nigerians if they're still very skeptical about the power sector. I think that's one of the major headaches they have as a people, and this has been on for decades. So some of them, even if they want to believe, it's really tough to believe. They've seen promises upon promises, agreements upon agreements, and we're still where we are, as they say. So maybe we can speak to what we should do different this time around, and whether or not we should raise our hopes as Nigerians, right? Again, this is some sort of agreement between heads of states and government, but each country has to do the yeoman's job, because I'm not sure Ghana is going to try to help us. If anything, other countries are relying on Nigeria for power. So both of you, what must we do differently this time? And what should we do as a people to maybe put government on its toes? Some will say they've tried their best, but there needs to be consequences, right? So what must we do differently, and how do we ensure that there are consequences for failure and it's not the same thing over and over again? Mr. Eke, you go first, and Mr. Nrize can take it up.
Okay, thank you very much. I would say what we must do differently, two things. One, we must think differently. Two, we must act differently. And I would take an example, looking at the issue of petroleum supply in the country, or petrol supply. I think this last Yuletide season, this last Christmas, was one of the first in recent years where we didn't have much issues around, fuel scarcity, and that was because there was, a change that resulted in a price signal that gave investors confidence to ensure there was supply. If you bring that to the electricity sector, what you then realize is that we actually need similar drastic change in terms of making sure that Nigerians understand that electricity comes at a cost. It is not free. However, there are other benefits that come from electricity. And so what that simply tells us is that, in terms of paying for power, we need to pay pay for a cost-reflective tariff, which, as long as we pay for that, there will be the right signals to give investors, whether it's in the local market or in the foreign market, to come in and make investments for power supply to be available. So for us, if we think differently about power, where we don't only depend on supply from the big generating companies through the transmission system, but also look at localized, embedded power solutions, which at this point, for us to quickly close the gap, we need to leverage on modern technologies, clean technologies like renewable energy sources, solar and the likes. Then what that means is that we would then be looking at an opportunity to scale up power supply, where at different feeders, different pillars, different transmission, different clusters in the country, different communities, we ask ourselves, what is the best way to ensure that there is 24-hour supply in this particular location? If we do that across the country, whether it's in the south, whether it's in the north, whether it's in the west, whether it's in the east, you'll be very surprised what we can achieve in a very short time. And I believe within the 5 years to 2030, we can actually electrify at least 60 million Nigerians. And you can imagine what that does in terms of putting us, just like India, other countries were able to leapfrog and get the most people out of poverty, even in China. I already know that in Nigeria, if we take power very critically and we say, look, as a country, let's focus on making sure that power gets to almost every Nigerian in the shortest time, you and I cannot imagine what will come out of that in the near future.
Okay, well, let me come to you now, Mr. Arinze. Same question. And I'm trying to channel the energy from Nigerians into this question because it's a major pain point. So what must we do differently? And I want you to speak to repercussions for anybody who drops the ball.
Thank you. I would say that a few things are important. We have a market, and a market can thrive because you have paying customers. On one hand, Nigerians need to ensure that they are faithful and committed to paying their bills, electricity bills. It's a business. But also, I would say that we see this very important initiative by the Minister of Power to sensitize Nigerians. When this sort of engagements come, this is an opportunity for you as customers, as citizens, to engage with your government, who, in fact, with the arm of government responsible for the quality of power that you and I experience. And so this sort of platform should be engaged very seriously. Ask the hard questions there, ask the tough questions there, ask questions that ensure that the government understands that its citizens are putting them on a point where they expect them to be accountable. Also, Mr. President has set in place a unit which includes the Ministry of Power, to ensure that the goals and the mandates that needs to be achieved to ensure that every Nigerian has electricity is being monitored closely. Next, we need to ensure that even as we walk through the various segments of the sector, we need to understand that Nigeria is open, for investment. I'll tell us for a fact that it takes all of us to get the sector to where we need. The customers who ensure that they're the most important part of the value chain to pay for the service, but also putting those other players across your utilities, across the distribution companies, across the transmission companies, and even the generation companies accountable. But again, I would say that Nigerians should not go to sleep. We need to ensure that we are asking the right questions and engaging more consistently. The Ministry of Power, through this initiative and many other platforms, would create citizen engagement opportunities. People should go all out and ensure that they keep the government accountable, because nobody else can put the government accountable than the people that it has promised to serve. And so we shouldn't fold our hands and say, oh, they will do whatever they like. but we would be at the front of this, asking the questions that require us to get the service that we so desire.
And we hope that indeed that process of keeping government accountable from the part of the people is smooth sail without any hindrance, without any inhibition, so that we can achieve the Light Up Africa project that we desire, particularly on this side of the divide. It's an ongoing conversation, clearly. Absolutely. So we thank you very much, gentlemen. Absolutely. Mr. Chibueze Eke is the CEO, Cizola Energy Limited, who joins us from our Abuja studio, and Mr. David Arinze, renewable energy specialist, who also was talking to us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program.
Thank you.